The Amalgamated Lawyers Association says it intends to challenge the Judicial Service Commission's decision to recommend the suspension of Gauteng High Court Judge Tshifhiwa Maumela together with Judge Nomonde Mngqibisa-Thusi. The Judicial Service Commission last week requested President Cyril Ramaphosa to suspend the judges over their failure to deliver reserved judgments in a reasonable time. Now, the Lawyers Association says it will simultaneously interdict President Cyril Ramaphosa from implementing the JSC's decision. And to discuss this matter, we are joined in studio by the President of the Amalgamated Lawyers Association, Advocate Tsundzuka Kevin Maluleke. And virtually we are joined, well, not as yet, but I'm hoping that we will get him very soon, Judicial Service Commission Spokesperson, Advocate Mvuzo Notyesi. And joining us, though, virtually at this point is legal analyst Abigail Ngobene. Good to have you. Thank you very, very much, gentlemen, for being with us.
Good morning to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And also to you as well, Abigail, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leah.
So let me begin with asking, I will come to you first in studio, Advocate. In terms of the reasons for the Commission's recommendation and the complaints, perhaps you want to talk us through them and give us your views on these reasons.
Well, what we seek to do as the Amalgamated Lawyers Association is to express our misgivings in terms of the stance or approach that has been adopted by the Judicial Service Commission, which is to recommend the suspension of Maumela and Mngqibisa-Thusi JJ, consequential to the JSC report or recommendation. Mm-hmm. And we do so simply to interrogate what is it that was operative in the mind of the decision maker when such a decision to recommend the suspension was taken. And this should be seen, Leon, against the backdrop that you would recall as at 31 December 2021, the Office of the Chief Justice informed members of the public that we have 156 reserved judgments in terms of our various divisions of our high courts. Then fast forward as at 31st December 2022, there is no updated annual report in terms of those numerous reserved judgments. So then the issue now that we seek to interrogate is now there are two judges that are implicated to say they have numerous reserved judgments which should have been delivered, which now has resulted in a complaint. And they are not the only two justices fortified in our conscience who have numerous reserved judgments. So then the question would be, why specifically these two justices?
Okay.
That's the long and short of it.
So that's the question we need to ask. But before we get to why these two specific justices, you mentioned these numerous delayed judgments. And I want to just come and ask Abigail for a second here, just to get your views on this. And also, I mean, the issue of outstanding judgments has really been a thorn in the judiciary side for a while. But how serious is it actually?
Thank you very much, Leah, and morning to my learned friend there at the studio. The issue of reserved judgments is very serious in nature. You'll also note from the conduct that regulates the actions of the judges to say every proceedings that is before them should be concluded without an unreasonable delay. And at this particular juncture, you will also remember that the statement which was issued by the JSC on the 28th of April, they said, if it's proven that the allegations against the judges are there's prima facie evidence to that effect, this will constitute what we call a gross misconduct and a gross incompetence on the side of the judges. So from the face value, Leanne and Marlene, friend, and the viewers, you will agree with me that the nature and the seriousness of this particular misconduct, so to say, is very serious in nature.
Yeah.
And you'll remember, just to paraphrase, that the JSC is constitutionally obliged to ensure that the independency, impartiality, dignity, effectiveness, and efficiency of the judiciary is always protected in line with the rights of a speedy and a fair trial. So in this particular matter, and this particular aspect where the reserved judgment takes for long, there are a lot of violation of rights of litigants. So it's very serious.
So, Advocate, I want to find out if you're on the line. I'm hoping that you have been able to tune into the interview, and that's, of course, the Judicial Service Commission spokesperson, Advocate Mvuzo Notyesi. Advocate, are you with us?
Thank you very much.
Good.
I'm with you.
Fantastic. I'm so glad. So I think before we even move any further with this, I suppose we need an official confirmation from you and from the JSC that you have in fact recommended that the two Gauteng High Court judges be suspended come the outcome of the tribunal hearing. Has this in fact gone ahead?
Yes, certainly the JSC has taken a decision to recommend the suspension of the two judges pending the conclusion of the investigation by the tribunal, to which the matter would be referred to for a further for investigations.
Yeah. So, talk to us about what is going to happen now after the JSC recommended that the judges be suspended. What is the process from here?
The process. Oh, thank you very much. Let me begin by saying, one would have to understand the background to this. The background to this is simply that a complaint was lodged and it was submitted to the JSC, to the JCC. The JSCC conducted investigation, informing the affected judges. They were allowed an opportunity to make submissions, their representation. The matter was carefully considered by the judges who constitute the JCC, and at the end, a recommendation was made to the JSC, where it was stated that, look, out of the evidence or what has been gathered, the information that has been gathered after those hearings, after that investigation, there is a suspicion based on reasonable grounds that the conduct complained of would constitute a serious misconduct. And then it should be referred to the tribunal. The matter was considered by the JSC. The JSC took a decision to accept the recommendations of the JSC, having considered the nature of the allegations, the nature of the complaint itself. So what is going to happen at this stage is that the decision of the JSC is that the Chief Justice would appoint, the Chief Justice has been requested to appoint a tribunal, which must then investigate and determine whether indeed these allegations, these allegations are established and they do constitute serious gross misconduct.
Okay.
Once that is done, the two justices will be placed on suspension for various reasons which the JSC has put forward, of which one of them, which is at the core, one would remember, the core function of judicial officers is to adjudicate matters and deliver judgment promptly, within the time frames. That is the core function of a judge. If now, in this instance, there are numerous judgments which have been excessively delayed, there is a potential that threatens the public confidence to the judiciary and the seriousness of this misconduct. All those constitute a reason for the suspension of the judge, which is a precautionary measure that is being taken. It's not a punishment of the judges concerned.
Okay, so I want to now come to Advocate Maluleke, because you don't agree with this. You're challenging this, and I mean, when we hear the reasons given as to why lots of judgments outstanding still reserved from 2018, there are too many of them, and this is a complaint that has been given, and I think it's from Justice Dunstan Mlambo that put this complaint forward. Why are you against this?
Well, precisely, Leon, I'll start off by what my learned colleague has just indicated. It talks about a complaint, or complaints rather. Those complaints, one should understand, they were lodged by Mulambo JP. Mulambo JP is the head of the justices concerned. Talk about remedial steps, which ordinarily should have been taken by the head of court to say, I have my judges who are under my watch, who are under my supervision, who are monitored through my office. What are the remedial steps that you have taken as the head of court? Do you say heaven must fall simply because there are reserved judgments or numerous reserved judgments? Because precisely we take serious exception to that. Because to start with, we should understand whether there were short-term interventions, were there medium-term interventions, were there long-term interventions. And if there are those interventions now necessitating a decision where we should say, pending whatever complaints may have been lodged to be investigated, these two justices should be suspended.
Yeah.
And we're saying they should not be suspended. They are not the only justices or judges in our divisions who have numerous reserved judgments.
Yeah. I know you've spoken to that, but I suppose the question needs to be posed and asked is that, don't you think that failure to deliver a judgment timeously is putting the entire justice system under the spotlight and in question? Because, I mean, the amount of awaiting trial prison, the amount of people that are sitting on the sideline waiting for judgments, it's growing and growing daily. And I mean, I know that the cases that particularly Judge Maumela is presiding over at the moment is a very high-profile case. Should this not be almost, in a way, setting an example? This shouldn't be acceptable that it takes this long.
Well, precisely, the issue here is, it's a balancing act that we need to embark upon. The point that we are stressing, it's about consistency. There are numerous reserved judgments from the Limpopo Division of the High Court dating back 2019. Some which were supposed to have been delivered by other justices there. I could just simply comfortably make mention of the retired Homo J, who has a reserved judgment dating back to 2019. And if we are going to talk about two justices as if they are the only judges with reserved judgment, what are we then saying?
Why are you defending specifically these two? When, as you say, there are numerous out there. We need to begin somewhere. These judgments should be delivered in, what, 3 months? Is that correct? They should be out in about 3 months. This is years, 2018, and the list goes on and on. Why are you defending them?
I must just place it on record, Leon. We are not defending the two judges involved. We are defending a principle to say there should be consistency. And in terms of the norms and standards, as promulgated by the former Justice, Chief Justice Mngqibisa-Thusi, the effort should be made that judgment should be delivered within a period of 3 months. It's not peremptory or mandatory that judgment should be delivered within 3 months. It's an effort that should be made by our justices. From the lower division, the magistrates, it affects that those norms and standards affect them, and also to the various divisions of our superior courts. So it's an effort that you have to make. But if we need to interrogate the position even further, we go to all divisions. Surely you are going to find reserved judgments that have not been delivered for more than 3 months. And hence we are saying, why should heaven fall in terms of the two justices involved? Why not other judges?
Yeah.
Because there are other measures which could have been looked at, talk about apologizing, talk about reprimand, talk about written warning, talk about any other corrective measures. Why must heaven fall that they should be suspended under the prevailing circumstances?
All right, Abigail, let me get your opinion on this. So we've heard from the JSC side, we've heard what's happening in studio with the advocates saying that this shouldn't be happening, that we're using just these two judges when there are so many more that do that. What is your view, especially with the background that this is an exceptionally important and high-profile case that we're dealing with?
Leanne, perhaps I should say the judiciary itself is the most important aspect, or rather an institution which should bring hope to all the litigants that appear before the court of law, those people who seek recourse. And I should say that I don't see anything as yet which I can say are grounds for review of the judicial committee that recommended for suspension. The fact that there are other judges who may be guilty of the same offense does not necessarily preclude the JSC from taking actions against judges. And it does not mean this is the end of it. And it does not mean they are not going to take actions against those other judges at all. I would just say, Leanne, that it is the judicial system is the hope of all of us. And if there is a threat to the independence, effectiveness, dignity of judiciary, the actions should be taken. And I reasonably believe that at this particular juncture, you will remember that the JSC does not say Judge Maumela and the other judge are guilty. The JSC says, as a precautionary measure, we will place them on suspension, but to create balance, we will allow them to finalize the matters that are before them. We will allow them to adjudicate on matters, for example, on the issue of Judge Maumela. There's an issue of the case of Senzo Meyiwa, which is currently presided by him, and this suspension does not necessarily relate to this particular case. Yeah. And there's nothing that precludes these judges from continuing with this particular matter. And I should say that this is just a precautionary measure, which says we take what are the complaints very serious, and we are out to be seen as the JSC to be taking actions against such kind of misconduct.
Yeah, and this is the reality. I mean, we're seeing up to 22 months in terms of delay. So we've got 2 minutes left, and I need to just get from the JSC's perspective, Advocate Notyesi, so the suspension, is it in effect now? So obviously, as we've heard, they are able to carry on doing what they are doing currently, but then once that's over, what happens then? And of course, this is now in the hands of the president as well.
Yes, the suspension would be effective immediately when the president actually signs. I mean, because the JSC has recommended to the president, and the president is the one that is going to sign the letters of suspension. Once that has done, they will be on suspension pending the finalization of the investigations by the tribunal and the subsequent decision that could be made. Bear in mind that because of the nature of this allegation, which the JSC has of which they have been determined as a gross misconduct, it may result on, maybe the matter may even go to Parliament or whatever, depending on whatever the outcomes might be. So they will remain in suspension and be able to conduct or to complete the cases that they are currently engaged with. But what I also want to put into correct perspective is that it is not the Judicial Conduct Committee that is recommended for the suspension of the two judges, but it is the JSC itself. All what the Judicial Conduct Committee did was to say, on the evidence, there is a suspicion based on reasonable grounds that if these allegations are established, they would constitute serious conduct of a gross serious misconduct.
Just thank you. Thanks very much for talking to us here. It's just so sad that we're out of time at this point in time. But the one question that I do need to ask here is that despite the JSC excluding the politicians recommended for the tribunal, why is this? And was this a unanimous decision by the JSC? If I may just pose that question to you, Mr. Notyesi.
It was a majority decision.
Okay.
It was a majority decision of the JSC.
All right. Okay. Let's leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us here on the program. That was the president of the Amalgamated Lawyers Association, Advocate Tsundzuka Kevin Maluleke, in studio with us. Virtually, we were joined by Judicial Service Commission spokesperson Mvuzo Notyesi and legal analyst Abigail Ngobene, speaking about the Judicial Service Commission recommendation that Judge Tshifhiwa Maumela and Judge Nomonde Mngqibisa-Thusi be suspended. Of course, with all of the reasons that were given during this interview.